Good afternoon, and thanks for coming. There are seats up front. You can come forward. There are a couple of tables here which have chairs. Please come forward if you need seats. I know there are many familiar faces here, but still, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Mangala Subramaniam. I'm a professor of sociology in the College of Liberal Arts and the director of the Butler Center. This is the last panel of the Conversations About Inclusion series for 2017-18. This series focused on specific topics since fall 2017. Today, we want to kind of close this year's this series in the session by looking at everyday practices and asking how can everyday practices create a truly sustainable, beneficial, and diverse culture. There are many people who've asked me or emailed me about whether the series will continue next year. I seriously don't know. We are thinking about it. We will have a new series, though. Please keep a lookout for our program for fall of 2018. We'll try to put out a tentative one the beginning of summer, but you'll see definitely a final program in early August. But we will have new series similar to this one and maybe some things that overlap as well. Today we have 4 great speakers on the panel. The first who will speak is Rachel Scarlett, who's third here from my left. Rachel is from Los Angeles, California, and she completed her BS in Environmental Studies at the University of California, Santa Barbara, and her MS in Ecological Sciences and Engineering here at Purdue. She's currently a PhD student here at Purdue, where she was awarded the George Washington Carver Fellowship. She's broadly interested in understanding the dynamic interactions between people and water. On one hand, she investigates the influence of watershed restoration practices on water quality of urban streams. And on the other, she strives to understand how social hierarchies influence participation in water resource management. Her work is interdisciplinary in that she uses methods across academic disciplines to address her research questions. Rachel is also a member of the National Socio-Environmental Synthesis Center, where she works with a team of graduate students to examine equitable governance and distribution of stormwater green infrastructure. Our second speaker will be Angela Goldstein, who is at the end on my left. She is the managing director of the Mechanical Engineering Educational Research Center here at Purdue, which focuses on improving student outcomes in the School of Mechanical Engineering. She has a decade of experience in the technology industry, working for Cisco and Google, a BBA from the Stephen M. Ross School of Business at the University of Michigan, and is an MBA candidate at Northwestern University's Kellogg School of Management. Here at Purdue, she is a program manager for Recourse, an initiative to improve professional student outcomes that drive change across ME through grassroots efforts. Our third speaker is Rhonda Phillips. Rhonda joined Purdue in 2013 as the inaugural dean of the Honors College. With an unwavering commitment to diversity and inclusion, she has helped build the Honors College to have amongst the most diverse student and faculty populations here at Purdue. All are welcome, and a focus on inclusion is actively planned. Please see their website. Her career began outside the academy in economic development in the 1980s. Later, she was the first woman to graduate with a PhD in city and regional planning from the Georgia Institute of Technology. Our final speaker today is Jean Beeman, who's here right to my left. Jean is an assistant professor of sociology at Purdue. She received her graduate and undergraduate degrees from Northwestern University. Prior to joining Purdue, she had postdoctoral fellowships at Duke University and the European University Institute in Florence, Italy. She teaches courses on race and ethnicity at both the undergraduate and graduate levels. Her research addresses how marginalized individuals understand their positions in society based on race, ethnicity, citizenship, and socioeconomic status. She recently published her first book, titled Citizen Outsider: Children of North African Immigrants in France, with the University of California Press. This came out in 2017. This book is an ethnographic examination of France's North African second generation and issues of upward social mobility, race and ethnicity, and cultural citizenship. Jean's current research focuses on the surveillance of racial and ethnic minorities and the resonance of Black Lives Matter and anti-racist activism in France. Her other interests include race and ethnicity, citizenship, urban sociology, sociology of culture, HIV/AIDS, international migration, and ethnography and qualitative methodology. Please join me in welcoming these four great speakers today.
I don't think the mic is on.
Okay. Is that better? Is that better? Yes. Okay. So, hi, my name is Rachel, and these mics. Yeah. Okay. So that's okay. Now I can start. So I wanted to start out by talking about why these everyday practices are so important. Has everyone heard about the Starbucks incident that happened recently in the news? Yes, right. So just to recap for some people who may not have heard, there were two black men sitting in Starbucks. They hadn't bought anything, and one of the employees called the police on these two black men, and they were arrested for loitering. And this incident is so important because it is a common everyday experience of marginalized people. Sorry. So marginalized students, marginalized faculty are constantly surveilled throughout our society. And I just wanted to talk about an incident that I experienced here at Purdue. I was traveling from my apartment to my building on a Saturday morning, and one of my friends called me, so I decided to sit in my car for about 20 minutes just talking on the phone. Next thing you know, a woman walks up to my car, and she was videotaping what I was doing. She was taking pictures of my license plate. So I rolled down the window and I said, "Is there an issue?" And she said, "Why are you here?" And this is the problem. Marginalized communities are constantly being asked why they're in the spaces that they're in. We constantly feel like we don't belong. So I just wanted to stress that the Starbucks situation blew up to the national level, but these things happen every single day. Can I speak loudly?
before my advisor says good morning to me, before I say anything to any other graduate students, I already feel like this space was not made for me and constructed for me. So that causes us to think about how can we reconstruct the spaces that we're working in to make people feel more included. So that brings me to my first point, is that we need to accept that the spaces that we work in are socialized. They're racialized, they're sexualized, they're genderized. I may have made up that word, but I think people get it. And it brings me to this quote by Margaret Sheldrake, who says, all of us, regardless of our own individual morphology, are participants in the sociocultural imaginary that pervasively shapes the disposition of everyday attitudes and values that we all therefore have the responsibility to interrogate it. And I think that's the last part that I want to focus on. We all have the responsibility to interrogate the spaces that we're a part of and the norms that we accept on the daily basis. So that brings me to another incident where I myself had to interrogate the biases that I brought into my relationships with my colleagues. I remember in undergrad, I was talking to a friend and a colleague about their relationship with their significant other. And they used to always say, my partner, me and my partner are going here, me and my partner are doing this. And I questioned, I think I was in maybe my sophomore level in undergrad. So I asked my friend, why do you call your girlfriend your partner? Isn't that word reserved for homosexual relationships? And I was ignorant at this time. And my friend said, no, the language that you use is important, because even though, yes, I am in a heterosexual relationship, using a term such as partner instead of girlfriend makes other people feel included, that they can talk about their partners in front of me, that they don't have to have, if they're a male, they don't have to have a girlfriend to talk about their personal relationships with me. And that really just caused me to think about, on a daily basis, the language that you use, your mannerisms that can sexualize a place, that can racialize a place, and you have to question that in every space that you're in, and interrogate yourself and interrogate how you're managing these spaces. And the last point that I wanted to bring up is, if you're a faculty member or even a colleague, you need to recognize the contributions that everyone in your workspace, but especially marginalized students and faculty, the contributions that they contribute to your work. And I say this because I have many mentors here at Purdue, but there was one mentor who recently said to me, you know, you do great work, like, you're doing a great job here. And I was like, I don't hear that very often. And when she said that, she was like, I don't think you hear it. I don't know if you hear this very often. And I was like, no, I don't. Can you say it again? That's what I thought. Because you don't hear it a lot, and especially if you think about marginalized students, they're coming into these spaces already feeling like they don't belong here. So just that little bit, that little extra recognition that you're saying you do belong here, you are validated in this space, and you are contributing something to this space. Not only because you're here, but because you bring different experiences to the table. So that's what I wanted to finish with. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing. Hi everyone, I'm Angela Goldenstein, and I'm Managing Director of an Education Research Center here called Meerkat. I have the pleasure of representing the staff perspective on this panel, which I'm super excited about, and I wanted to take this as an opportunity to focus a little bit more on in the theme of everyday practices that foster inclusion, kind of things in our day-to-day work life that might foster a more inclusive environment. And so I wanted to start by talking about a grant that I work on. It's called RED. It stands for Revolutionizing Engineering and Computer Science Departments. And as part of this initiative, we're focused on improving the School of Mechanical Engineering, specifically with regards. Can I continue with this one then? And it's meant to improve the School of Mechanical Engineering, specifically with regards to students' professional outcomes. And when we approached this project, we started with grassroots teams in the school and wanted to encourage everyone to work on initiatives that they thought would make a difference. And what I want to share with you is that about a year ago in the spring when this initiative started, it was actually right before I joined the team. They said, let's start with faculty. Faculty are key to driving change in the school. They're the hardest nut to crack. Let's start with teams of faculty. And the goal was to have faculty volunteers who are working on these grassroots teams to try to drive change. And just to give you a couple examples of the types of change we're talking about here, one could be rethinking the way office hours are done in the school. So rather than this being, in a faculty's office, which is a little bit closed off and is a little bit intimidating to students, could they be in a more neutral space? One was thinking about how can we get more undergrads involved in undergraduate research opportunities, for example. And what we saw is that there was a ton of enthusiasm, and we actually did get about 30 faculty volunteers, and 30 out of the 80 in our school was a pretty high percentage. But for a variety of factors, these teams weren't as productive as we thought they could be. And so when I joined the team, one of the first changes I made, and that the team had always wanted to do, but I really championed for, is to say, okay, we tried this in the spring. What do we want to try in the fall? And one of the key changes was instead of just having teams of faculty, we had teams of faculty, staff, and students. And I'm happy to say that we had a ton of participation, really, really active staff and student involvement, as well as some strong faculty involvement as well. And we allowed them to also choose their own topics. And so an example of some of these topics, again, one was the co-op program, trying to improve the co-op program, make it a bit more flexible, encourage more students to participate. One was about student assessment, getting a chance for professors to understand how are students in the class grasping the concepts that they're teaching. But this brings me to kind of the outcomes that we saw, which I thought were pretty interesting, in that, compared to the first semester and the second semester, experiments that they launched actually tripled over that time. So we saw that across the board, teams were much more productive, and teams were also much more engaged. Attendance had gone up. Maybe unsurprisingly, but teams that were primarily led by staff tended to be a bit more productive. Really just recognizing the contributions in the room. And another key point we saw was that project management across the board seemed to be really key to the experience. And what I mean by project management is not only kind of facilitating the conversation, but also making sure everyone's voice is heard, making sure that when a question comes up, the question is actually answered, making sure that when a conflict comes up, there's actually a decision related to that conflict and that those things are documented and that there's follow through. Which brings me to, again, the theme, kind of everyday practices that can foster a more inclusive work environment. One is equity of voice. So really making sure that everyone has a seat at the table, especially regarding change initiatives, making sure that there's diverse perspectives in the room. So if you're trying to change something that has to do with a student program, making sure that students' voice is included in that experience. If you're trying to change something regarding a program that is primarily staff-driven, or that staff have a really kind of key operational component in it, making sure that they are a part of that decision-making process. Another thing we saw in the veins of project management is that, a strong project manager, especially one that kind of has an objective perspective, can really play a key role in making sure, like I said, everyone's voice is heard, and that, if someone's not really speaking up, they can kind of try to pull it out of them and kind of phrase questions in a way to make sure everyone has the same understanding and everyone is on the same page, as well as mitigate conflicts that come up in the discussion. The third point is kind of credit where credit's due. So another thing I kind of championed for was strong incentives for people who really went above and beyond and were volunteering their time and making this huge contribution. And specifically for if we're going to give faculty a monetary reward for their time, making sure that staff are also appropriately rewarded and that students are also appropriately rewarded. I cannot tell you that the staff that were rewarded just were so immensely grateful. They actually had a higher response rate to those emails that were kind of announcing, like thanking them for their volunteering and letting them know that there was monetary compensation. They had a higher response rate. They sent longer responses. Their responses on average were more appreciative. One said it meant so much to him that he actually wanted to pass it on to 2 admin on his team that he felt did the bulk of the work. He kind of paid it forward and took it as an opportunity for that. Another thing is we did kind of in-depth interviews and research throughout this process. And we heard from some staff that this is the first time they really felt like they had a seat at the table. That this is the first time that they were actually, like I said, kind of part of the decision-making process. And this wasn't just kind of a decision that was handed down to them, that they were now in charge of kind of making happen. I think I want to pause there because I want to say on the one hand, I feel so kind of proud that I was able to be a part of this initiative that gave people that opportunity, but also just say, you know, there's something wrong with that if we're not including people in the decisions that are making here, or that are being made here. Lastly, just wanted to touch on, you know, my background is kind of interesting for Purdue in that I come from industry, and I spent about a decade in the tech industry at this very small startup that you've probably never heard of called Google. And just that all of the points that I just shared were really things that were embodied by the culture of Google, and that I think is really key to an organization that wants to move fast and include everyone kind of around the table and kind of attract and retain talent. And just wanted to share that on a very human level. I think that people really want to be valued and appreciated and rewarded, and also kind of work at a place that feels like they are invested in their career and wants them to succeed. And so with that, I'll leave just kind of 2 more just really practical tips in this context. Just encouraging people when you're going through kind of your day-to-day meetings and your day-to-day projects. You know, if you find yourself, if you're the type of person that maybe doesn't always contribute in those spaces, I would challenge you to have kind of small goals for yourself. One of my previous managers shared, you know, if you're going to a meeting and you're just sitting there and kind of passively listening, then why are you going? So on that note, I would challenge you to kind of speak up at least once, maybe a couple times, and kind of build your way from there. And then at the same time, if you're the type of person that goes to meetings and maybe talks for almost 100% of the time, recognize that dominating the conversation in that way actually prevents other people from contributing. So, you know, maybe talk for 75% of the time instead of 100% as a start. And then just also kind of in general attributing ideas to who is bringing them to the table. So if someone's speaking up in a meeting, it's definitely happened to me where I've brought up an idea and it's been attributed to someone else. So just kind of recognizing, I think we can all be aware of that, and just kind of really trying to champion and give credit where credit's due and make sure that people's voices are being heard. So with that, thank you, and I look forward to questions.
Okay, does that work okay? Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay, well, I just want to share a little bit with you about the Honors College here at Purdue. And when we started this back in 2013, we set out to say this is an intentional community. It's going to intentionally be diverse, and it's going to be inclusive, and we're not going to accept that it can't be or that anything can prevent that from happening. And so we've done things, I think, maybe a little differently than some might, and that's okay. And I want to share a few of those examples with you today. We wanted a place where all are welcome, meant everyone, across the diversity of perspectives, and it would be embedded in the learning opportunities so that it wouldn't be more of the same, that students might be exposed to, but something truly different. And so if you look at our webpage, on the very front landing page is an inclusion statement. And we designed that together. It wasn't just a few of us sitting around thinking, well, that sounds good, or that sounds good. We, all of us, staff, the faculty, some of our students, we all sat down and we worked on this for quite a while. So I want to read this to you because I think it sets the tone for what we do, and hopefully will be a little bit inspiring to others as well.
It is a privilege that we come into contact with people of diverse perspectives and orientations. To refuse engagement with those who are different from ourselves is a lost opportunity to think, and to know its form suppresses learning. we seek to embody in our personnel, our residential community, and our classes the values of collaboration, understanding, and respect. We affirm the importance of all lives and celebrate the many ways in which we can learn from each other. We welcome students of all nations, races, ethnicities, religions, gender and sexual identities, ages, socioeconomic groups, physical abilities, and political beliefs. The Honors College is proud to be a designated safe zone for LGBTQ students, staff, and faculty. And differences in ideas, we will forge the future. So that statement really embodies what we try to do across the whole spectrum, whether it's students learning in a co-curricular or a social event, or whether it's in our classes. We include our statement on all of those that we teach. But just saying it isn't enough, because just about everyone says it, right? I mean, you can find some similar statement or some version on just about any website or in some of the documentation, you'll see it. But just saying that we support diversity and inclusion, again, is not enough. You have to embed it into
Three major areas that, at least from an administrator's perspective, and those areas are practice and processes and expectations. Because if no one actually sets the expectations and says, this is where we want to be and this is how we want to do it, then it may or may not happen if you leave it to its own devices. It has to be explicit. Because my experience through the years and starting out in a male-dominated profession before I was an academic, and then ending up in a profession in the academy that was male-dominated, especially at the time, you have to learn pretty early on that if you don't make your expectations known and heard, it will not happen. It's not by chance that we get to where we want to be as units, as societies, or in any other configuration of human beings. And so I strongly believe that a culture has to be set by including all and reiterating over and over and over again the message and what you stand for and what you expect. And if people aren't meeting those expectations, why not? And what can we do to get there? And I really think that idea of setting the culture is paramount. It has to come from everyone in that unit, whether students, if it's part-time, if it's an alum, if it's a dean or a director, or whoever it is, faculty member, everyone has to be able to say, this is where we make a difference and we're going to take a stand on it, and what we stand for in the Academy of Learning, of Knowledge, and Scholarship. So I want to talk about just a few brief examples. And usually this is about setting the tone and sort of a culture of expectations, but also it reflects how you can embed it into your processes that you use in your unit or your college, whatever division you're in. And the first thing I wanted to talk about, and this may seem a little odd, but it's about the search process. I've been involved in many searches through the years for, all the way from, hiring, clerical, op-tech, AP staff, all the way up to leadership at some of the highest levels of an institution. And one of the things that was striking to me when I first came here, because again, we were a new college, we had, I think at the time, 4.5 positions allocated to us, and no faculty other than those who were graciously volunteering some time to help us teach very large classes. And now we stand at 32, and then we work with many faculty from across the campus. But we had to do a lot of hiring. And I remember from the very first search, we set out this idea that we are going to look for diversity. And so I'm not going to name any names, but when they came back to me to say, here's who we found, there was absolutely no one of any diversity or color or anything. And they were all from pretty much right here. And I thought, well, that's totally fine. If we have someone here at Purdue who's just perfect for the job and has the skills, all the better. But we can do this. And so we had to actually sit down and figure out really of strategies on how to do that. So if we're looking, for example, for someone who has a certain skill set in, say, academic advising or whatever it may be, where would you go to find people of diversity that would bring different perspectives? So, maybe in some cases we'd go to the programs where recent graduates would be coming out of those programs, and they were known for having diversity and inclusion in their teaching. Talk to those department chairs and others and say, who do you have who's graduating soon, or do you have a list? and you have to try harder. Because if you just put your job out there, regardless of which level it is, and say, well, I hope someone sees it maybe on the Purdue HR website, and maybe is enticed to respond when it's open for a relatively short period of time. Yes, you may get some candidates of diversity, but likely you won't. And I can't tell you the number of times I have sent back things or pushed back when I've been on a search for, not in my own unit, but others. And the things that I've heard, and I always take that as a learning opportunity and try to say, we can do better and we know how, and here's some ideas on exactly how to do that and to do outreach. But comments like this, which is, and I'm not going to name any names. I like my job, I want to keep it. But for example, when we got to the final analysis of trying to select, say the 4 or 5 who would go forward, the comments go like this. Well, the person's from here, and they likely wouldn't leave. And then the other candidate might be someone from somewhere else who brings a lot of diversity and different perspectives. But we'll go with the one who's here, because that way they're captive, they won't leave. It just defies any, when you step back from that, it defies any sort of logic when you really look at that, because you're looking for the best candidate, but you're also trying to bring in diversity, to be inclusive, to get people who bring fresh, new ideas. And I push back, and I push back hard. And, I try to do it in a nice way, but I push back. And that goes back to this idea, we all have to take a stand for what we believe in. Because if we don't, if we ignore it, then it only becomes worse. And it becomes to the point where then it's not the culture that we want to be part of. So we have to do that in whatever context we are. The other example is just this idea around the difficult incidences that happen. They're inevitable, they happen. You mentioned one already, or several. They're not going away. We're a society of complex creatures, and it's always going to be conflict, and that's just inherent in our lives. But when it happens, it can serve as a learning opportunity, but it's also important to address the damage from those occurrences, because there's a tendency to want to say, well, we've recognized it, we've moved on, but then the follow-up is as critical as the initial response, because what begins to happen when these difficult incidences happen and raise their head, not everyone is affected equally, and there are members of our community who feel the impact differently than the majority. And unless we're able to recognize that and respond to it and take action, then we are not really doing our jobs as well as we can to be inclusive and to foster diversity. And so I would say, that second thing is you have to embed this into your practice. You have to respond. You can't ignore it. It will not go away. And you have to take action. And there are times when that action may cause some issues or controversies, but you have to be willing to do it, because if you don't, who will? And so, we have tried to do that with all of our staff and faculty and our students. Everyone is responsible for this. It is not just one person, it is everyone, and that's building that culture where we can achieve what we want to do. So there's two different things. There's one, with look at your search practices, embed some of those processes. Don't accept that the only pool you have has no diversity in it, because I don't believe that, and no one does. I mean, we have a diverse country. We can pull in talent, and we are living proof of that. We've recruited from many states, including very warm states, and we've been able to do that. And you can't just accept what the status quo is. You have to be able to push forward, and then of course take action. That's the other thing I would say as an example. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I think this is working. Okay, good. Okay, great. So I will be very brief to make sure that we have time for discussion. I want to quickly thank Mangala for this amazing series this year on different facets of diversity and inclusion that I've very much enjoyed. And also sort of thinking about everyday practices that foster inclusion, I also want to thank Mangala for being a great senior colleague in the sociology department around these issues. And so I just want to publicly say that. So as Mangala said, I'm a sociologist, and so I'm going to speak a bit from that perspective, but also from the perspective of a Black person who works at Purdue and who lives in this community. So when I was thinking about what I would say today, I was thinking about focusing on, or I decided to focus on, the question of allyship and how we can demonstrate an appreciation for diversity, but also efforts towards full inclusion, or sort of recognizing and incorporating people that we identify as different from us in any way. So I just want to provide two very quick examples of how I saw this, one in which I thought that this did not work as well, and one in which I thought it was more effective. And hopefully that'll sort of foster some conversation. So the first example I want to illustrate or talk about is after Donald Trump's election in 2016, I don't know if people remember, there was a movement to wear safety pins on your, lapel, collar, what have you. And so I thought, as a way of sort of, showing solidarity with people who might feel marginalized or distressed as a result of his election, and obviously he's still the president. So I think what was unsettling to me about this, and sort of what I want to connect this to in the conversation about what it means to be an ally, is that I think we should ask, or we need to ask, who is this work for, right? Is it for the person wearing the pin, or the person who's supposed to be, feel concerned or feel relieved because of the pin, right? Do they actually make people feel more included or more safe, or is this more about the people who wear them feeling better about themselves, to be completely frank? And so, as you might suggest, I wasn't a fan of this movement, and I can say more about that in the Q&A, but I think this is an opportunity to push this conversation forward, to think about what we really can do to include other people that are different, right? Because if you recall, people wore safety pins for several weeks, and then suddenly it went away, even though many of the conditions under which people were concerned about Donald Trump still exist, because again, as a reminder, he is still our president. Okay. The second example I want to quickly say is about the incident in Starbucks. So I won't repeat the facts of that because I think it's more recent, and you've already brought this up. But I want to make two quick points in how I thought that this was a more effective example of how this allyship might actually operate in practice. So first I'll just say, sociologist Elijah Anderson, who's a sociologist at Yale University, has this conception of the white space, which he, I think maybe obviously we can imagine Starbucks being. So he says, quote, when the anonymous Black person enters the white space, others there immediately try to make sense of him or her, to figure out who that is, or to gain a sense of the nature of the person's business and whether or not they need to be concerned, end quote. So I think this is really helpful for thinking about a couple of things as it relates to this particular incident. One is that I think oftentimes, at least in the media portrayals of that incident, it was sort of became a question of what exactly happened, what precipitated the police being called. But it's since been revealed that 2 minutes after the man entered the Starbucks, the manager called 911, right? So this is a really example of how are people responding to the presence of Black individuals in, as Elijah Anderson would say, a quote-unquote white space of the Starbucks, right? Why is that causing alarm? Why is that raising alarm, right? And I think that's the question, or one question we can ask. And then the second point I want to make is that part of the reason why we know about that incident is because Melissa DePino, who's a white woman, recorded the interaction and uploaded it to Twitter, right? And so I think this is a really good example of allyship really working, because if you've read interviews or seen interviews with her since this incident, she's been very clear about the fact that, this is not something that people like her ever experience, right? And she's also been very clear about the fact that people keep asking her, well, what happened? What really happened beyond this video, right? And I think that's a really good conversation or question about this, about the topic of allyship, right? Are we taking people at face value about what they said happened, or are we sort of automatically looking for alternative explanations because we cannot imagine that this sort of hyper-surveillance of racial and ethnic minorities is still occurring in our quote-unquote colorblind society, right? And so I think, so I think another reason why I think this works well is that, among other things, she acknowledges issues of power. So this, I think, is really crucial when we think about diversity and inclusion. Not just sort of, making sure everyone has a seat at the table, but making sure everyone is heard at the table, right? And so it's not sort of a question of tokenism, but actually a full sort of inclusion of these individuals. And then finally, I'll just quickly say, I wrote an editorial for the Lafayette Journal and Courier a couple months ago that I can share with anyone who's interested, but the point here is that one of the things I was really interested in was various incidents that have happened in this community that are sort of racial in nature, if you will. And one of the things that bothers me, both as a Black person living in this community and as a sociologist, is the sort of proverbial clutching of pearls that we have whenever these things happen, right? And so why are we continually surprised when these incidents occur? And I think the problem with that, beyond sort of the general annoyance of it, frankly, is also that I think it sort of inhibits us to move forward to really think about how might we change our community, or how might we make our community a place that we actually do feel included, or that we all feel included, that we all want to live in. And so that's kind of, so that's basically what I want to sort of leave with, sort of how much are we listening to people versus sort of dismissing either directly or indirectly their concerns or the issues that they bring to the table. And then the final point I'll just say very quickly is that a former colleague of mine here, Suad Abdul Kabir, who's now at University of Michigan, has this really great quote of sort of, you don't have to necessarily have the responsibility or feel the responsibility to speak for the voiceless, but you do have to pass the mic, right? So this question of sort of, again, how much are we making sure that everyone's heard versus sort of just sitting at the table that we're at? So, thank you.